The topic of abortion is no doubt one of the most contentious debates of our age. In these two episodes, we're each going to take in the facts and lay out our views regarding abortion. Hey, I'm Bailey.
I'm Michael.
And I'm David.
And welcome back to the Facing the Gates podcast. Today we are talking about, as I mentioned, one of the most controversial topics ever. We're going off the deep end, starting out just to,
get your vacuum cleaners and clothes hangers ready.
Wow. Okay. Anyway, I this is going to be a two-parter episode. It's for people at home. We're recording this as one big episode, but I'm going to split it in the middle because it's probably going to be really long. But anyway, this is going to be a topic that may be triggering to some, as Michael's wonderful joke has already set the precedent, unfortunately. But hopefully it will be informative and fruitful nonetheless. I will go ahead and say that to me, this is the single most important issue in America, and it is unfortunately a problem that is spread throughout the world. That being said, I have a lot of information to go through, so I'll be presenting that. We'll be going back and forth, and then we'll discuss the implications of these two views and how to fix the problem. Also, a lot of the presuppositions that we are bringing to the table in this discussion can be found in our episode where we discuss our prevailing political philosophies as to what the role and purpose of government laws and rights are. So if you haven't heard that one, you may want to start there. That all being said, I'll let you guys begin by laying out your case, and then I'll lay out mine. And since I have so much information here, that will kind of lead the conversation, and we'll have a back and forth on that.
Want me to go first, David?
Sure.
All right. Let's start off. I am pro-choice, not because I think abortion is correct or the proper means to go about it, but the same reason I am pro-drug. Not because I want everybody to go start smoking crack, banging heroin. Don't fucking do that. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Don't go pumping babies and getting them sucked out without thinking about, the repercussions of sex and the reproductive process and the vast means we have in modern terms to prevent that. But it is still a prevalent issue in politics and in the global ecosystem through this day. The reason I am pro-choice is, just like with drugs, it is very clear that even if you illegalize something, it does not stop it from happening. They made guns illegal in so many countries and counties and states. People still get shot every day. Drugs have been illegal in America for, let's go on, most of them 60, 70 years. We have record amounts of overdoses, record amounts of drug addiction. Making something illegal does not stop the problem. That is prevailing why I am pro-choice. And I've heard the horror stories from people I know who have worked in the medical field back when it was very much a even more taboo topic than it is today. And seeing people losing their life for a decision they made and a mistake they made. Nobody deserves to lose their life for something they were going to make the choice to do, whether or not. It is not my choice to condemn them or congratulate them. It's just my choice to, if you're going to do it, harm reduction is the key. But even more than harm reduction is spreading the awareness and the other ways to prevent these issues and to educate the populace.
So if I were to summarize your case, and this actually does get into a bigger topic, which is principles, political principles. But to summarize your case is essentially, number one, you believe that even if we outlawed abortion, abortion would still happen. 2, it is your principle of, and I don't think you specifically mentioned this, so if you don't want to go into this, that's fine. But in our previous times we've discussed this, you've mentioned that one of your principles is bodily autonomy. And if you don't want to go into that, that's fine. But essentially that kind of applies to drugs as well as abortion and whatever you have, whatever you should do with, it's your body, you should do it. Am I putting words in your mouth, or is that accurate, or what?
There, to a point, that's correct. But then there's also other stipulations, like if you are legally cognizant enough, mentally well enough, and the age to consent to certain things. Like, I don't give a shit if someone goes from male to female, female to male through hormone therapy, surgeries. I just want them to be of legal age and of developed mind to be able to go through these things.
Okay.
So, like, I'm not saying a 12-year-old should go fucking switch to another gender, but I am saying if you are of legal and sound mind, that is your choice to make, not mine.
Okay. Well, obviously we're actually going to do an episode on that specific issue, so I'm going to save my thoughts for that episode on that issue. Yeah. And I'm not going to sit here and like refute all of your arguments. I'm going to let you make your case, and then when we come to that point where I can kind of push back on some of your things, I will. But David, I'll let you go ahead and go. I imagine you're probably just going to say, yeah, what Michael said.
I mean, pretty much. Essentially, yeah, you know, right on the head. Between the idea of self-autonomy and the core principles of pretty much a major issue with, say, the need for abortion, and is both the problems of abortions are still happening even in places nowadays where they're illegal, and they're happening unsafe, and they create more cases of, say, like the mom dying. And then if you look at some of the places where they're illegal and they're happening a lot, there's a population increase, and population increase is also partially due to the lack of, say, higher education, so like even high school. But yeah, so due to kind of our experiences, we do line pretty much in line with each other there.
So more people is a bad thing, so we should abort people?
No, I'm just saying with places that have less education have a higher birth rate and stuff like that due to the kind of less stressors of the modern world, I guess you could say.
And also,
well, that's just a cultural observation. That's not necessarily a moral imperative.
Well, not necessarily, because take like the US. As we've increased our education, our birth rate has declined.
Yeah.
In, say, like Japan, look at how their birth rate is in the negative, essentially. And
our birth rate's not very good either right now.
Yeah.
It's not quite Japan, but yeah.
It's not doing well. So, increase in the wrong areas can also have its own problems. Now, abortion is not the way. Education and stuff like that, and having good food supply and stuff like that, but that's an entirely different issue.
Right. Okay. Well, from my perspective, obviously, I am very much in the pro-life camp. Today, I'm going to be making a case for that. It's worth noting that I will be making my case in the abstract. That is, I'm not attacking anyone who has chosen to have an abortion. Instead, I'm contesting abortion on principle as a legal quote-unquote right. However, this discussion would be very ill-informed to leave out assistance for women who are struggling, be it women who are debating having an abortion, struggling to care for a newborn, or anything in between. In the show notes, there is a link to over 20 pro-life resources for women in need of help. So that will be there for this episode and the next one as well. That all being said, I will not be holding back on what I think about this issue. I believe it is a simple case for the pro-life position can be made based upon moral common sense, and it can be strengthened quite considerably with a simple analysis of abortion statistics. Now, abortion is a particularly interesting topic for us to cover on the show, because not only does it involve very important moral questions, but it also leans heavily into philosophical assumptions and the metaphysical presuppositions about the value of human life. It also ties into several other issues, such as the death penalty, fatherlessness, and poverty, just to name a few. And I think the ideological split in America rears its ugly head in this debate. And oftentimes, based on your worldview, you can kind of tell where someone will likely land on this issue. That's kind of an overview of what we're going to be talking about. I don't know if you guys have anything to respond to about that, but if not, I will go into starting to make my case, essentially, and we can kind of go back and forth.
I'm ready to dive headfirst into this baby and bathwater situation. Throw them both out.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So the pro-life position is this: the intentional killing of an innocent and unborn child is morally unjust and therefore should be illegal. So, as a Christian, I believe that all human beings have a natural, inalienable right to life, which is why I'm pro-life. As our very own Declaration of Independence states, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are chief among those inalienable rights. I preface this that this presupposition comes from my religious beliefs, as I believe the prevalent secular worldview does not provide a satisfactory moral grounding for such things as human rights, which we've discussed in previous episodes, but we'll circle back to that more specifically at the end. My personal legal philosophy is that laws are put in place as a sort of moral guideline, and whatever is legal is morally permissible according to that society's standards. The fact that our society deems abortion a morally permissible act is a demonstration that something is wrong with our laws concerning abortion. I believe that abortion is the greatest evil that we allow to go on in America, and yet I find the manipulation of language to make it seem virtuous to be a disturbing, yet unfortunately all too common tactic of the political left. For example, using terms like pro-choice instead of pro-abortion, reproductive rights, and women's health care are all linguistic smokescreens for sugarcoating the real issue here. So let's call abortion what it is. It is murder of the unborn. Abortion is the intentional killing of an unborn child. I believe that life begins at conception, as literally any science textbook will tell you, because there is a unique DNA code created at that point in time. This is not a religious presupposition, it is a scientific and empirically demonstrated one. I'm sure you guys probably have responses.
Yeah, with
Real quick,
the
I have an
wordage
issue with the
Hold on.
definition of abortion. It is not the taking of an unborn life. It is just the deliberate termination of a human pregnancy, which does not mean the fetus is alive. If you miscarry...
So it's not alive.
Not...
So what is it?
Let me explain. It can be a dead or an alive fetus. A miscarriage is an abortion. The removal of a dead fetus is legally
it's an abortion.
There's a recent case in a Slavic country where a lady died from having to carry a dead fetus to term because abortion was illegal, because the legal definition of abortion does not regard the life, whether the fetus is alive, dead. Because if the fetus is dead, it's no longer alive. It's dead.
Well, I think we can all agree that in cases of miscarriage, that is not the same thing as intentionally ending a pregnancy. And so
Yes.
whether
But
it's a matter of whether that's a matter of changing legal definitions to allow for miscarriages, which I mean, you can't not allow for miscarriages because miscarriages are going to happen.
But they have arrested people for miscarrying a fetus and put them in jail for life in several countries. And there have been cases brought against.
I'm not arguing for that.
And there's been
my case
cases
isn't
in
against
America.
miscarriages.
I know.
Yeah,
but
but
there's
it
been
does.
cases in America where women have had litigation brought against them for having a miscarriage,
Yeah.
because that's what it is.
And the idea of either way a precedent being set can possibly lead to the slippery slope where one or the other happens. That's a problem with our laws.
That's the problem with legal systems in general, is they're usually extremely binary for good reason for some things, like, but then they allow slippery slopes that happen. Like with drug laws, you can get 25 years for carrying an ounce of pot, or you can get 5 years for diddling a kid.
So essentially what you're saying, if we get off the topic of miscarriage, because we're essentially on the same page about miscarriage, when it comes to abortion, you guys disagree that abortion is the intentional ending of a human life.
Yeah, medically it's ending a pregnancy either.
Okay, that's
With
the
the
same
fetus
thing.
dead or
Why are you
alive.
making a distinction between
Because
that is the
pregnancy and
legal
human life?
definition, is
Yeah.
if the fetus is alive or dead and removed from the mother, that is terminating the pregnancy. That's why we're making this definition, because legally there's no difference. In places where they've already made these legal changes, they haven't made this difference. There is no difference. In abortion, in the definition, it's a termination of a pregnancy, whether the fetus is alive, dead, or even if it's culpable.
So to
And
we'll talk about that part later. But go ahead.
And the statistics brought up, they don't say whether the fetus was alive or dead, or because if you have a miscarriage in a hospital, or you go to the hospital for a miscarriage, and
Some of them
it is-
specify, some of them don't.
for broadly they don't. It's
I have
still
some
on the paperwork.
that specify.
On the
we'll get
medical
into that in a minute.
paperwork you get, it's still charged as an abortion.
Okay. So this is gonna, we'll go ahead and go into this rabbit trail just because it's kind of already there. Oops, sorry. Would you make a distinction between, is there a certain point in which a pregnancy where the child is considered alive in your view? Is there a distinction between human and person, or is just the simple common sense thing to say a baby is a baby is a baby?
The way I look at it, and obviously this is my skewed viewpoint because I can't have a child, I
Mhm.
physically can't carry one, is if you can take it out of the mother and with normal terms it can survive, even if it's on a ventilator with IVs and shit, if it can survive, then it is a baby. If it has developed, I look at the legal term for a fetus, which is legal through homicide investigations, murder investigations, things like that. When it has developed lung tissue, that's usually one of the last things to develop. That is when it is legally considered a person. So then if you terminate it, that is murder. That is homicide. So if you shoot the lady in the stomach and kill her and the baby at that point, that is a double homicide.
Yes. So that's actually something I was going to bring up later. So you would draw the line at viability, essentially.
Yes, because that ties into my belief on the right to die, and also my right to a DNR, which is a do not resuscitate order. If I am not viable, don't keep me viable.
I think when we make a distinction between like a human and a person, I think that's unnecessary and has led to a lot of, historically speaking, it's led to a lot of atrocities in human history. It's, for example, World War II. Jews were viewed as subhuman and eradicated in vast numbers. In early American history, slaves weren't considered human so as to justify slavery.
The judicial system, you're not human, you're property.
Yeah, so that distinction, I think, is a false distinction to make because it has potentially unlimited implications as to what type and group of people we can subjugate under the law. So anyway, I think we've gotten off on a rabbit trail.
Just a little bit, but I mean, y'all
let's
listening
summarize
expect this.
Yeah, that's how this episode's going to be, just because there's a lot of things to talk about here. So is there anything else we needed to kind of address with that specific issue, or do we want to go ahead and go into statistics?
Unless y'all have any more questions for me, I'm ready.
The idea about the kind of perception of pro-choice and pro-life are both problems, because pro-life because as kind of, for example, that baby's born, goes to an orphanage, gets abused and whatnot, but no one is talking about, say, the rights of foster children, rights of orphans with pro-life. At what point is that life? And what kind of like what, as you said, with pro-choice. Though with pro-choice, in my eyes, it's not saying, yeah, go get an abortion. It's, hey, you have a choice to make. You can keep the fetus until it is a baby in you and then have the baby, or you can have the pregnancy terminated within a certain time frame in a medically safe area. That's kind of where I lie. So and the issues I have with the pro-life kind of movement, because it's just like, say, with the left-right divide, it's kind of back and forth where they just kind of go at each other instead of being like, oh yeah, here's some other issues with these that we could kind of advocate for, such as with the problems with our foster system, education, sex education, stuff like that. Which, I mean, we talked about some of those issues and kind of...
Right. So I will say that definitely when you say that no one who is pro-life cares about these other things, that's not true.
No one, but, it's...
But here's the thing, right? You have pro-life organizations, and there is a limit to what they can address as a pro-life organization. Typically speaking, pro-life is relegated to the issue of abortion, and there are other organizations that they might refer you to address the issue of the foster care system or fatherlessness.
So I would say it's not pro-life, it's anti-abortion, just as like you would say pro-choice is pro-abortion, because it's taking that term life. And when do they stop caring about that life? And that's also a kind of issue I have with a lot of politicians that could advocate for more and kind of bring into laws reform issues we have as well. Because, I mean, like, our foster system is severely messed up. There's a lot of abuse and kind of just doing it for the money.
Adopting a kid is harder than making a baby.
Yeah. So the other thing is, just as a kind of a forewarning for people, we're going to be talking about some of the other issues, but we're not going to really go super deep into them, and we're not going to solve all these problems in this episode.
Yeah,
we're going to talk specifically about. Yeah, we're gonna bring up the implications of it, and that's important to talk about everything that it brings up.
We're going to kind of build those spider webs, because this is a core issue, but there's so many other.
It touches so many other areas.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, the education kind of reform of our foster system stuff, we've talked about this a million times before, and we mostly agree on like, yeah, this stuff needs to be fixed, some ideas, education, all that mess. It's just where it stems from.
Okay.
But yeah, so kind of as a retort to your pro-choice is pro-abortion, pro-life should just rename them to anti-abortion instead of just pro-life. Because life is just a lot more than the beginning. It's the middle. It's the end as well.
And as kind of a rebuttal to the pro-choice thing, when we were talking about like the left kind of virtue signaling a lot,
Yeah.
I think pro-choice to a moderate person seems more virtuous because it's open to both, whereas pro-life is more exclusive. And in our society, inclusivity is the highest good. So a lot of people who are in the middle who don't know about the issue just side on pro-choice because it sounds more virtuous.
Or
And we've actually... Go ahead.
And to tie into that with the virtue signaling, it's one thing to say, yeah, I'm pro-choice, or yeah, I'm pro-life. It's another thing to actually try to communicate and try to make a fucking difference.
Mm-hmm.
We, as just three people, by communicating and putting our different viewpoints, we're doing more than most fucking people ever will to do anything about this.
This is a starting point. It's not
it's not an end point,
obviously, but
it's the start of a journey.
Yeah.
You got to start a fucking journey somewhere. And even though we may extremely disagree with each other, as you guys will see, it all ties together. We're all humans at the end of it, and we all have a similar goal in mind.
All right,
which we will touch on later.
Yeah, there's a lot of things we'll talk about. So I think that was a good kind of discussion. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the statistics. So today in America, roughly 2,363 preborn babies will be aborted. In 2019, roughly 891,000 abortions were performed. In 2018, approximately 31% of all pregnancies in New York City, excluding spontaneous miscarriages, ended in abortion. In 2017, approximately 18% of U.S. pregnancies, excluding spontaneous miscarriages, ended in abortion. And in case you're wondering where I've got these numbers from, all the sources are in the show notes, so you can check those out. So statistics are important when we come to talk about this issue. I think it's important to know the numbers, but it's also important to know who has abortions. I think it's a vital question to ask if we're going to find a solution to the problem. So according to the CDC, unmarried women accounted for 85% of all abortions in 2018. In 2018, roughly 9% of abortions were had by women ages 15 to 19. 28.5% were had by women ages 20 to 24. And 29.4% were had by women 25 to 29. In 2018, white women had 10% of abortions, whereas black women had 25% of abortions. 51% of women having an abortion used birth control the month they became pregnant. And the abortion rate of women with Medicaid coverage is 3 times as high as that of other women. Now, there's a couple other more statistics I want to go into real quick. Another important question to ask when looking at abortion statistics is, why are women having abortions? According to the Guttmacher Institute, less than 0.5% were victims of rape, 3% were due to fetal health problems, while 23% said they couldn't afford a baby and 25% said they weren't ready for a child. There were other reasons listed between those, but for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to use these. You can see all the statistics in my sources. Now, also, Florida records a reason for every abortion. In 2018, there were 70,083 abortions, and 0.01% of cases, the pregnancy was due to incest. In 0.14% of cases, the woman was raped. And in 0.27% of cases, the woman's life was endangered by the pregnancy. So if you're counting, that's less than 0.5% of abortions for the most often cited reasons why abortion should be legal. While 20% of the cases, women aborted for social or economic reasons, and 75.4% listed no reason. Now, why you can list no reason as a reason is beyond me. That's for someone.
Yeah, if they're
Florida,
getting a reason, it kind of makes an problem with data gathering. Though also you're right to say, like, if you go to the hospital and they're like, hey, what happened? I mean, you can just lie to them too.
Yeah,
but for the idea of data gathering and for statistical analysis. But yeah, like how you listed the economic issue, because that's one thing, especially like in America, is kind of a trend with say like issues with gaining minimum wage, gaining gainful employment instead of just minimum wage, and the kind of economic disparity with abortions, at least in the common ground.
Yes, and that is a bigger issue that we'll discuss further as the episode goes on.
And got any more stats? Because I got a few.
That's all my statistics. Well, I'll bring up some in other cases, but that's the gist of what I wanted to talk about now.
Yeah, and I'll share mine too. I got this from
just
CDC.
send me your link and I'll put it in the show notes.
I got this from cdc.gov/reproductive help/datastats/index.htm for anybody who wants to type that long ass thing in.
Or just click the link in the show notes.
Yeah. In 2019, 629,898 legal-induced abortions reported to the CDC from 49 reporting areas. Please note that it's 49 reporting areas. That's not everywhere.
Right.
Amongst 48.
That's the other thing about a lot of these statistics is they're not going to be 100% accurate. They're probably going to underreport a little bit just because.
Yeah, and it also is a problem with undocumented, say unsafe ones, because unfortunately, even in America, it still happens.
Yeah,
though to a lesser extent.
Among 48 reporting areas with data each year during the 2010 to 2019 time frame. In 2019, a total of 625,346 abortions were reported. The abortion rate was 11.4 abortions per 1,000 women aged 15 to 44. And the abortion ratio was 195 per 1,000 live births. From 2010 to 2019, the number, rate, and ratio of reported abortions decreased 18%, 21%, 13% respectively. However, compared with 2018 and 2019, the total number increased 2%. The rate of reported abortions increased by 0.9%, and the abortion ratio increased by 3%. Similar to previous years, in 2019, women in their 20s accounted for the majority, 56.9%. The majority of abortions in 2019 took place in early gestation. 92.7% were performed at less than 13 weeks gestation. Smaller number, 6.2%, were performed at 14 to 20 weeks gestation. And even fewer, less than 1%, were performed at greater than 21 weeks gestation. Early medical abortion is defined as the administration of medications to induce an abortion at less than 9 weeks gestation, consistent with the FDA regulation labeling for milfrazone, which was a drug implemented in 2016. In 2019, 42.3% of all abortions were early medical abortions. Use of early medical abortion increased 10% from 2018 to 2019 and 123% from 2010 to 2019. And that is the MMWR Surveil Sum 2021 /70, where that is found from.
Gotcha.
And please note, everybody, that is not all of them. That's not all the statistics, as we stated before. There's a lot that are unreported or not in reporting areas. So take that as you may, take that with a grain of salt. Because there's still...
I wouldn't quite say a grain of salt. Like, it's accurate, but it's not as accurate as it could be. So it's a good starting place, but it's not like,
There's still legal ones that were performed outside of this reporting area. There are still plenty of illegal ones that are reported outside of... You're not going to report an illegal one. They're just going to find out either through medical documentation or they'll never find out.
Yeah, so that's going to be an interesting topic. What we've talked about, kind of mentioning the demographics of people that have abortions. It is disproportionately poor, usually black women a lot of times. And yeah,
like
that's obviously problematic.
Like to go into that,
but we will talk about sorry, I was going to say we will talk about two things at a future point in this conversation. One, kind of how it got to that point, and two, hopefully how we can start working to fix that issue
as a society.
Right.
Remember, guys,
right. So
we got to do this shit
foreshadowing
together
for later this episode. Anyway, go ahead, David.
But yeah, it's not a complete kind of stat, but there is. But I'm just kind of paraphrasing. For the global world, 45% of all abortions are unsafe, of which 97% are taken in developing countries. So people who are more economically unwell, essentially.
And if you want to send me that link also, I'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah,
just
is
because I want to.
Is that the who.int link, David?
Yeah, and scrolling
Okay,
down,
send it.
I mean, they're listing kind of medical stuff with abortion, the pros of having it safe, the cons of not allowing it, and there's quite a few references, about 8 of them, and the economic impacts and all of that. So it's a fairly more into resource, but you have to look at it and go to the bottom and read the resources yourself and kind of get that, which we recommend.
So, okay. You guys have kind of brought up 2 common main arguments that I think I want to kind of address. And first one is the one that Michael mentioned, is essentially that if we outlaw abortion, it wouldn't really get rid of abortion because women would still have them, just not legally.
Yeah, like it happened before Roe versus Wade.
Right. So, to put into context, in countries where abortion is illegal, the abortion rate is 5% of countries where abortion is legal. I'm not saying our abortion rate would be the same if it were made illegal, but that is the trend. And as a general rule of thumb, I think the less infanticide we commit, the better.
Yeah, though to go kind of against that, that's the documented ones. The ones where either they got caught, they had to go to the hospital for it, while a lot of it being illegal happens in the underground, where
you can't really report. It's like reporting how many drugs are sold in America. You can only report based on what you find, not what actually happens.
And as we know, with say like drugs, crime, any illegal underground activity, it happens more so than we want to admit.
Yeah, and also it's an inherently expensive thing, legal or illegal.
As a general principle, though, the point that I'm making is, anything we can do to cut that number down is a good thing, because we should probably just not be killing babies. That's probably a good thing to stop doing that. Now, I didn't want to come out the gate with this number because it is very shocking. We were just talking about statistics, but to put it into perspective, Planned Parenthood has killed more babies in America, about 7 million, than Nazi Germany killed Jews, which is about 6 million. And the total number of abortions in America since 1973 is over 60 million. So that's why I say any amount of abortion decrease would be a good thing, because it would be saving innocent lives.
But what's the date range for the 70s? Is it to say 2022? Or is it like
from 73 to where? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
I would have to double check. It's probably 2019 to 2020. That number is actually higher than 7 million last I checked, but that's why I guessed around 7 million.
That is 40 going on 50 years. And so if you take that number it would be, let's just round it up or down, I don't know, like 1 million a year documented. Though also, Planned Parenthood also does, say, women's health and health screenings, sex education, stuff like that. They're just not abortion.
They make most of their money off of abortions, and they use those other things to facilitate abortion. We'll talk about Planned Parenthood later, but yeah, obviously the Planned Parenthood is the leading provider of abortion in America, and they also... obviously, there's other places that provide abortion, but... All right, so essentially that was the idea I was wanting to get across there. The other thing I wanted to address is David's argument that abortion is safe, and if it were outlawed, it would become unsafe. Beyond the fact that it is actually quite opposite of safe for the child, it's quite lethal. Here are some statistics about women following having an abortion. Following an abortion, women are 34% more likely to develop anxiety disorders, 37% more likely to have depression, 81% more likely to have mental problems, 110% more likely to abuse alcohol, and 155% more likely to commit suicide. Further risks and adverse effects depend on the type of abortion, but include uterine perforation, cervical laceration, internal organ damage, internal bleeding, infection, hemorrhage, maternal death, and future pregnancy complications, and more. So while it is rare, it is possible for a woman to die during an abortion procedure. In 2017, 2 women died as a result of complications from an induced abortion. Between 1973 and 2015, 447 women were reported to have died due to complications from legal abortion. On top of this, 88% of women who have had an abortion regret their decision.
To touch base on the mental health aspect,
Yeah.
do we know if these women had access to any mental health screenings or anything beforehand? Because since it is largely for impoverished, I can tell you from experience that being impoverished means you usually can't afford to go to therapists. You usually can't afford to go to psychiatrists, to doctors in general. So you can't have these things documented. It took me years
Yeah,
to be able
I
to
think
afford to get my stuff documented.
Yeah,
My
that's
depression,
a fair.
post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah. because I
anxiety.
think it would also, for those numbers to kind of be placed in stone, we would also need to know, say, what at least like, did they have depression beforehand? What were their economic statuses? Because all of that plays into, say, suicide. Suicide's not just you have one bad thing happen, you kill yourself. It's a
You don't just wake up and blow your
multi-layered
brains
issue.
out.
Right. So
And,
that is
like,
that is a fair.
And kind of at the beginning with like abortion and kind of just in general with medical procedures, they're generally safe, but there's always a risk.
Yeah,
and I
you
think
can go.
it
There's
falls
people
onto
that
the
die.
practitioner to inform them before even that date, like, hey, this has a risk, here are the risks, so the people can be consenting to the and have their risk appetite kind of weighed.
Well, that's
Yeah, but-
okay. So there's
Well-
two things.
Yeah, well,
Let me-
well, if you want to go first, or
Yeah, let me respond to two things. Number one is the point that Michael made that we don't know specifically. It's because correlation doesn't equal causation is essentially what you're saying. So the source that I got this from was a pro-life organization. Specifically, did they survey to ask like what other comorbidities there were? I don't think so. However, as I've looked into certain pro-life organizations, this is a common service that a lot of them provide is mental health help, because it is commonly known that women who have abortions have other problems following that abortion. That is a common trend.
You don't get one because your life's all dandy and good either.
Right. So that is a service that pro-life organizations provide, and they wouldn't be providing it if there wasn't a need for it.
yeah, I think that
As far as
also,
like getting down the rabbit hole of what exactly caused it, I don't know enough about that, admittedly, but I do know that this is at least in some part due to the trauma from having an abortion. Now, the other thing I was going to say, I don't remember it, but David said it, and I'm just going to let him go because I'll probably remember in a minute.
Well, you were saying that there can be complications with abortions, which I didn't necessarily touch up on, but yeah, as I said, with any medical procedure,
That's what it was. Okay.
there's the possibilities, while doing it in a medical setting decreases the possibility of death versus having it done in a back alley. It's
Yeah,
not
I was
necessarily
given
100%
paperwork.
change to like, oh, it's everything can be hunky dory. You're all healthy. There can be issues just with anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was shown the mortality rate of getting my fucking wisdom teeth pulled out. People die getting their wisdom teeth pulled out. It's not at a great rate, but
Mhm.
anytime you do any medical thing, which this is something we'll touch on later, is I believe that it is the doctor or provider's duty to inform you of the inherent risk of any medical procedure, whether it's a shot, whether it's getting your wisdom teeth pulled out, whether it's having an abortion. I think people should definitely be educated on the risk that any medical procedure happens, because there's people that go in for routine things and don't make it out, and then there's people who we hear about who should be dead making it out.
So that was the other thing that I wanted to address is that essentially there is... Oh, geez, I lost it. What were you just saying?
Pretty much there's a inherent risk to any medical procedure. And how many deaths happen due to legal abortion within its time span from Roe versus Wade to current?
David, what was the last thing that you said? I was literally there, and as I was about to say it, it just disappears from my brain.
Yeah.
I hate this.
Pretty much
Just repeat the last thing you said, and I'll probably remember it.
in short, pretty much abortion taking place in a medical facility has a lower mortality rate than an unsafe abortion in a, say, back alley, for example.
Okay, it's gone. I don't know why it's gone.
But yeah,
That frustrates me. It was an important point,
It'll come
but
back.
it's gone now. Okay. Well, the next part I wanted to go into is
Real quick,
okay. Go
I
ahead.
got one more thing. This is from Statista, showing the reported deaths from legal abortions from the age range of 15 to 44 years old from 1973 to 2018 on the maternal side from legal abortions. And I'm just going to run through these real quick. 73, 47, 74, 33, 75, 34, 76, 14, 77, 21, 78, 16, 79, 18, 1980, 12, 81, 9, 82, 83, 84, 12, 85, 86, 13, 87, 9, 88, 16, 89, 13, 1999, 1990 the year, the number 9 afterwards, 1991, 12, 92, 10, 93, 9, 94, 12, 95, 4, 96, 9, 97, 7, 98, 9, 99, 4, 2000, 2000 the year, 11, 2001, 8, 02, 10, 03, 10, 04, 8, 05 and 06, 7. And when I say the 2 years, that's the number per year. 2007 is 6, 08 is 12, 09 is 8, 10 is 10, 11 is 2, 2012, 2013, 4 apiece, 14 is 6, 15 is 3, 2016 is 8, 2017 and 2018 are 2. Note, stops at 2018 from the age range of 15 to 44.
Okay, so just
And
out of
this
curiosity,
includes
can you refresh me on what those numbers were? Because I missed the first part.
those are number of abortion-related deaths reported in the U.S. from 1973 to 2018. Mother, the deaths of the mother.
Okay, right.
And
so
that is-
essentially, what I was just to summarize that, I'm not, obviously it's not like, that's why I said it's not common. It is possible for women to die from having an abortion, and they will more than likely have some kind of adverse effect from having the abortion. That was the point that I was making. Obviously, it's not super duper common, but it is. There's kind of this lie that like, oh, well, if you just go to the hospital and you have an abortion there, everything's going to be hunky dory and you can go back to your life and nothing happened. That's not true.
Yeah,
That was the other thing. I remembered. Okay, I finally remembered. Let me say this before I forget. Planned Parenthood. It's gone again. Maybe I'm not supposed to say this. Okay, so. Oh my god!
But yeah,
why?
but that's
it keeps
also
disappearing. I swear.
what you just said. It's something we've actually talked about. Where, first stuff like this, say like mental health and stuff like that, education is such a good preventative measure because I mean you don't get abortion just as you said, and once you do
that's what it was.
everything's
Okay.
all hunky dory.
All right, let me say this before I forget. Planned Parenthood doesn't always educate people. There have been lots and lots and lots of undercover videos unveiled about Planned Parenthood, about them deliberately misinforming people or just not informing them at all about the abortion procedure and process. That is obviously problematic. Now, if you want to look into these specific cases, I'm going to bring up one later in this discussion, but that's a pretty damning case. The other one, if you would like, go on to liveaction.org. They do some undercover investigations on Planned Parenthood. I'll mention later specifically what those kinds of things have uncovered, but let's just say that Planned Parenthood's not a good company, obviously.
Yeah, I mean they're a corporation. The main thing with that would be, say, regulating and with, say, like abortion services. Unfortunately, in America, Planned Parenthood is the biggest. And, you know, once you're a private company, yes, they have to go through health laws and stuff, but the procedure they make and stuff isn't necessarily under, say, a full stringent law. It's just like, a few things about this procedure, and then we can do it. Instead of like, hey, mental health, stuff like that.
For lack of better terms, Planned Parenthood is put forth by the government. They were funded originally by President Nixon in 1970. That in of itself tells you everything you need to know about how.
I think you can learn more by learning about their founder, which we'll talk about later. So we'll put a pin on the Planned Parenthood thing because we're going to come back to that. So the next section I wanted to talk about is the procedures specifically. But before I get into that, I think it would make sense to just go ahead and talk about the arguments for abortion, which you guys have brought up some. I have responded to a few of them here and there. Basically, I've brought up a brief of the common arguments for abortion. If you guys would like to just kind of, if there's any that you guys want to address, we can talk about those, or I can just kind of go through them real quickly. Is there any that specifically come to mind that you haven't already brought up?
I think all of mine, for my stance, have already been brought up. And I think we've discussed the numbers, the statistics very well. So, in my issue with the legalistic term of abortion.
Okay, so some people will say, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily you, but some people would say that an unborn child is just a clump of cells. Is this something you would back or no, and why?
That is a very faceted topic that me, myself, am still forming my opinion on. So I'm not going to necessarily speak on that one because it's still an evolving door, kind of. Like my theological and political perspectives.
It comes from because, I mean, technically we're all just a clump of cells that know how to do stuff really well.
That was going to be my counter argument to it is essentially that you are also a clump of cells.
It's not necessarily.
So is it okay to murder you?
Yeah, it's not necessarily the idea of like, oh, they're just a little clump of cells. I think it falls into the idea of sentience, which counter argument to that is, even though
that's the human versus person distinction that we were talking about before.
So with sentience, what level is sentience? Say a dolphin has sentience, a raven has sentience. Octopuses are really fucking smart. At what
But
level?
we still murder them,
Oh yeah, we still murder and eat them. So
which is
Both-
a good counter argument to the whole we're just a clump of cells. Is we still kill animals and eat them.
Is
So
a
unless
person
you're-
in a coma who's not conscious viable? Is a person who is 90 years old, who is dying of dementia, but still alive, does that make it okay to kill them? The problem is that abortion opens up a slippery slope for if these people, if these individual humans don't have inalienable rights, who else doesn't by that same standard?
yeah, though the counter yours is we've had abortion legal since the 70s, and we still keep, say, coma patients alive. We still have people with Alzheimer's alive.
Yeah.
Even once they're at the final stages where their body is shutting down.
But I'm saying the same arguments that you use to support abortion can be used to support killing other groups of people as well.
Yeah,
That's the
Yeah.
problem.
well, especially with that one, it's the problem of where, like, the level of sentience, and if it's a 0-1, a binary, or if it's a gradual scale, because either way, that one argument by itself can be a big issue. And it's
but
kind of like with the
also-
namings, it's not necessarily the idea, because we're all just a bunch of cells. It's the idea of sentience.
Yeah,
It's
but
a
also
material.
the counter argument would be, well, if I'm shot in the fucking head and my brain is no more, does that make keeping me on a machine to keep me alive? Because I'm technically still alive. Legally, I am still alive until they pull that plug. Which that's a multifaceted thing we can touch base on later.
Mhm.
But everybody, get a fucking DNR. Get a end of life plan going while you're young.
Have a both living and dead will.
Yeah, this is a serious topic for me because my granddad had a DNR and they went through it and he had to suffer for 4 years because they brought him back from being dead. So people, seriously, figure out what you want in life. Get a DNR. If you want a do not resuscitate order, make sure you have more than one person who knows what you want in cases like that. Sorry to get off on the side topic, but that's something close to my heart.
Okay. I would also, I want to challenge David because a couple episodes ago he mentioned that microbial life forms on Jupiter's moons qualify as life. So by that standard, how does a fetus not qualify as life?
Well, with that, it's the bacteria can self-sustain. It's kind of like as Michael said, basically a baby is a baby once it can live outside the womb. At the very beginning, it is not viable outside the womb.
And there's
And
lots of
delicious.
other mammals that go through the pregnancy process like humans, but we don't kill them because that would be immoral.
I mean, we
people
do.
Yeah,
Slaughterhouse don't give a shit.
yeah. And
We grind
mean-
up baby chickens into chicken nuggets.
also
we eat chicken fetuses. You ever cracked open an egg and there's a little bit of red in there? That's a baby chicken.
Mm-hmm. And also say, like with that, the viability of a lot of other mammals, because they don't have as big brains as ours, is more viable earlier into a pregnancy. I mean, they hop out and they start running. But that's instinct versus learning, and that's a whole other topic.
Which, side note, that'd be horrifying if a baby hops out of a woman
Yeah.
and starts fucking running.
Yeah, that would be terrifying.
And I mean, the culling practices of, say, our farming industry, meat industry and stuff globally happens.
People eat balut, which
Yeah.
is a fully formed fetus in an egg with feathers and bones and organs, and they just slurp that shit up, which is disgusting.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the next question or argument. And this is probably one we probably should have addressed early on just because it's relevant. Men should stay out of the question. This is a matter of women's rights. Okay.
I mean,
I'm going to go ahead and address this, and then I'll let you guys respond, because we are all men talking about abortion. So there's a number of responses to this. First of all, men are being killed in the womb, so obviously it involves men. Also, if you're for women's rights, what about the women you're killing in the womb? I find it interesting that oftentimes the same women who are trying to silence men on the issue of abortion are also the same ones to give a mic to a guy if they want to talk about feminism. The individuals who decided Roe v. Wade were also all men. The broader issue of abortion involves men because it takes two to tango, and many men in our society have an inability to take ownership for their actions. So yes, this issue involves men.
yeah, that's
Also, I'm
one
an
thing
American and I'm going to have an opinion, so fuck you.
yeah. That's one thing I want to touch about, because unfortunately, the American stereotype of a single mother is an issue. So then childcare all falls onto a single person. The maternal figure in our society, it legally has the most rights.
Yeah.
There-
For
and
better,
I'm gonna state,
for better or for worse.
I'm gonna state in South Carolina DSS terms, even if you're married and you can prove that is your child as a male, you essentially have no rights to that child. And that also means that if you just up and fuck off, child support isn't fucking support. You're just giving money to make a problem go away.
There's also a double standard where if a woman gets pregnant and she decides to go through with the pregnancy and have the child, the man is kind of culturally expected to be there for that. There's kind of an obligation there. But if she decides to have an abortion, all of a sudden the man doesn't have an opinion and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I don't think that's a right double standard. I think if you
y'all
two are
both-
grown enough to fuck and make a baby and make a mistake, both of you guys should have to deal with it. I don't think it's right for fathers to be able to be absent, and I don't think it's right for both parties not to discuss this on the other end as a partnership. If a man can sign his rights away because he wanted to have an abortion and she didn't, then if that's possible, it should be vice versa too. But also they both should have to converse and discuss this, because it is a child is a serious fucking underbringing, no matter what viewpoint you take on it. I think in some aspects, men get off too easy on it. In other aspects, they don't get enough rights in it. So I think
I would agree with you on both of
and
those
that's
things.
skipping past the nuances of, say, abusive situations and stuff like that can
Yeah,
happen,
'cause-
because then the person that then it falls strictly to, say, the mother's side if she's the abuser or the abusee.
yeah,
As the power dynamic has shifted, but in an equal, good, healthy relationship, if y'all are going to
Even-
raise that child, if y'all plan to have an abortion, it should be something y'all both talk to the doctor about, plan out, think
There
about
was-
both mental
I'm
health
gonna-
and stuff
I'm
like
gonna-
that.
throw in one thing. You said healthy relationship. Even in a relationship where the two people aren't good for each other, or
Yeah.
they're pieces of shit to each other, that is still both their child, as long as they are not abusive towards that child or anything. They both have a legal right. Now,
you also
granted,
have
if
a
the
moral
man's
obligation to provide for the child that you decided to create.
yeah. Now, granted, if the man's a woman beater and she runs off, I can't blame her, because fuck that guy. We all know, there's more than likely we all know someone in our life who's been in a situation like that.
Yeah. Or if she's
Fuck
a man
that guy.
beater and he runs and gets out of Dodge,
He should also have a legal right to that baby too.
and
Not-
be able to fight for that child. But in that case, if he can't, then I mean, if she's going to beat you every time you try to see the kid, kind of
Yeah.
understandable. Not
Because
Not
I've
the
heard
best.
too many horror stories of somehow men getting guardianship of a child and they're fucking cracked out and beating women. And the same for the women. They're cracked out and beating the living shit out of
Yeah.
their partner or their child, and the man's just scared of losing their kid. I think on that end we need to just restructure this whole fucking shit.
Yeah, because
Child support and everything.
one
because-
person.
Because if you get in a relationship and the roles are swapped and the woman's the breadwinner and the provider and she runs off, she should have to, and he's the one taking care of the child solely, she should have to pay fucking child support. This road goes both ways, motherfuckers. You brought a fucking baby into this world. You're responsible for it. It's not society's problem.
There's another thing that I wanted to mention because you guys were kind of talking, I think, agreeing with me that men should have responsibility for their choices.
Yeah, if you
There was
want that right, you have to have. If you want that equal right, you have to have that equal responsibility.
There was this is kind of funny. There was a story recently. I don't remember what the politician's name was, but he was a Democratic politician that thought he could pull one over on the dumb pro-life Republicans. And so he drafted a bill for his state that he wanted to essentially, if a woman couldn't have an abortion, then the man would have to be responsible for that child. And much to his dismay, Republicans supported the bill because this is actually what a lot of pro-life people want and are calling for. But a lot of people, I guess, just live in their echo chambers and don't know that it's not. There's this caricature on the left that, Republicans just want to oppress women, when in reality, like, they're just not even listening to what people on the pro-life side are saying. Like, this has been a thing that has been addressed.
Yeah. No,
Yeah, see, I think the
unfortunately, that
issue-
falls into kind of, as we spoke in last episode, and with, unfortunately, people like the Westboro Baptist Church doing their kind of extremist methods has kind of made the nuance of the situations. Because, I mean, I don't say like with you, I don't agree about illegalizing abortion, but as I said earlier, everything else we similarly agree on for the most part. And with like that situation, I mean, he did it just to try to be a troll, but
Yeah, he ended up not signing that bill into law because he got bullied by his own side on Twitter and then went back and changed it.
Yeah, that's the issue with fucking politicians and the vocal minority. They need to shut the fuck up and let normal people talk.
I would have just edged out the part about abortion in general and just been like, yeah, if you have a child, you gotta take care of it.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to
Yeah, and then there's
I'm going to move on to something else, but
yeah,
go ahead.
no,
Go ahead.
on the other hand, there's the Republican senators running our pro-life that their daughter gets an abortion in Cancun and stuff like that.
There's a number of Republicans that aren't really doing their due diligence on this issue.
So we've already spoke about the hypocrisy of both sides.
Right.
Yeah, check out our last. Is it our last episode or the one before that? It's one of them. Check that out. We're all just
progressivism.
absolutely jaded with our politicians at this point.
Yeah. Okay, so this is one that let me see. I'm just gonna skim through my other. Okay, well let's just go ahead and talk about this one because this is one I know you guys want to talk about. It's kind of one of those areas that abortion touches, but isn't specifically about abortion. And I'm going to try and steelman a Democrat argument here. They would say, well, Republicans support the death penalty, so they're logically inconsistent. Is that an argument you guys would make?
I see where and this may sidetrack a little bit, but it is inconsistent, but humans as a whole are inconsistent. I don't personally believe in the death penalty as punishment because I don't view that necessarily as punishment. I see that as, oh, you don't have to sit in a fucking cell by yourself for 23 and a half hours thinking about the fucked up shit you did. You don't have to live with that anymore. Lights off. This world's no more. And I'm also a proponent for, as I stated earlier, get a DNR, have your end of life plan in action before it happens. And I'm also, I think if someone is terminally ill, that they should have that right to choose to go in with some fucking dignity. But I don't see the death penalty as punishment. It's not that I don't agree that some people need to be removed from this fucking earth, but I don't necessarily agree with the binary of that statement, because they're both very nuanced and like the intricacies within, not on the statement itself.
All right, so here's, and I might, because I think you're kind of beating around the bush of what I'm going to say here, and maybe this might help articulate what you're trying to say. Part of it is not all pro-lifers are pro-death penalty. The difference is this. For some people, pro-life is a principle that carries across all areas of life. These people are pro-life and anti-death penalty. For others, pro-life is not a principle and is relative to the issue of abortion. They may hold different views when it comes to different topics and different scenarios. The devil's in the details, as the saying goes. So essentially, it's a matter of principle.
Yeah, and also, as I said with the last thing, it falls into the, say, certain senators, governors, and stuff being like, oh, do this for sanctity of life, but we're going to murder this person. The state legally will murder this person. It's like, if you say sanctity of life, just in general, without any nuance, it drops out. Because, I mean, I'm not for the death penalty. As Michael said, it's not the thing with our prison system was supposed to be rehabilitation, not just ending a life.
Even though I do strongly believe that some people don't ever need to get back in society because they're not fucking, though I'm not going to say necessary charges, but there's certain charges out there that make you subhuman in my eyes, you absolute vile piece of shit.
Yeah, so also, when comparing the death penalty and abortion, they're not even remotely close to the same thing. The argument for abortion is that an innocent unborn child should not be murdered. Pro-lifers advocate for rights of the most vulnerable, the unborn. The argument for the death penalty is that someone who has committed a particularly heinous crime and is beyond rehabilitation should be killed because it's better for society. One kills innocent unborn children, the other kills convicted criminals who are a danger to society. Beyond this, abortion killed over 600,000 infants in just 2020. Capital punishment killed 17 in 2020. They're not even remotely close to the same thing.
Because we made it hard to kill people in jail. Really,
yeah, America making it hard to kill people. What a weird thing.
Yeah. No, the death penalty and the issues with that is a whole other topic because it has a lot of issues.
Yeah. So this is obviously a little bit of a rabbit trail, but it does tie in because this is kind of a red herring that some Democrats will pull in an argument about abortion to say, oh, well, what about? And like, that's not what the issue is about. That doesn't prove your case, but I'll go ahead and bite and answer it anyway.
Yeah, because it falls into like, as I said with the governor saying, all life is precious. Well, what about the person that just murdered 24 people out in public daylight? He has a life. It's precious. It's it's just that kind of broad generalization turns instead of actually speaking on the issue and nuancing it.
Right, which is why you have to ask people like what their principles are, because, and to be fair, there are a lot of people who haven't thought about this, who don't know what their moral, religious, philosophical, political principles are, and don't know, like, are they pro-life just in general? In which case they would be pro-life and anti-death penalty, or are they pro-life specifically towards abortion because that's what it's relating. That's what they mean. Like you have to kind of dig to understand what people mean sometimes.
Yeah, because I mean, that's kind of what I was, one of the things in the beginning about my issues with pro-choice, pro-life. If it gets to the topics like, as you said, pro-choice should be pro-abortion and pro-life should just be anti-abortion. I mean,
it makes talking about these things so much fucking easier. Because it's
in a sense, but also people will make This actually segues well into the next thing. Pro-lifers only care about the baby inside the womb and don't care about the overflow of children in foster care. Kind of like the last argument, this is a non sequitur, and it does nothing to prove logically that abortion should be legal. But even if I grant that there's an adoption shortage, which is true for teens, but not in the slightest for newborns, how would it follow that it would therefore be better to just murder the child instead? So let me make my case here, and I'll let you respond. If a child is aborted, they have a 0% chance at living a good life. If a child is put up for adoption, even if they have a 1% chance at living a good life, that is still a non-zero number, and it matters. It means giving them a chance, whereas abortion does not. Anyone who makes this argument essentially has to be okay with going up to a child in foster care and saying, you really should have just been aborted, because that's essentially what's being implied. Secondly, obviously people are adopting children, but who do you think these people are? The ones who value their existence or the ones that view them as parasites? Alabama had the highest recorded number of adoptions the same year they passed the heartbeat bill. Pro-lifers are also paving the way for early life care with resources for young families completely for free, but of course the media doesn't cover that. And some of those sources can be found in the show notes, actually.
Yeah, that's like in, I want to say Sweden, what they learned, they stopped focusing, and obviously it's due to how their media goes, sadly. They stopped focusing on the abortion part, and they were like, and they pretty much publicized like, bro, here's some diapers, here's some formula. We're here for you. They created that community, and it came, and that's why when we went to the Lutheran church and I saw what they were doing for that, I might not agree, but that precedent is still very, very good to be like, hey, we're taking this money, we're buying diapers, we're doing this, we're doing that. This is part of our mission as a church, is to walk the walk and talk the talk. And I think on both sides, there's bad faith actors who aren't willing to do that. They're just willing to say stuff. Whereas one of my closest friends' husband, he is a pro-lifer, and he dedicated his life making a lot less money being an attorney for children rights, because he said, if I'm going to believe this and this is my conviction, I need to put the steps forward to do what I can to help these. And I think that's the same that could be said. Both sides need to do that, and we need to stop bickering.
Actually live out your principles.
Yeah. I mean, because I love, using that against people that haven't thought about the problems with, say, our foster system and stuff, and that don't think about, oh, well, if this child lives and it goes through adoption system, what happens? Because 1% is better than 0%, but if we could make that from 1% to 100%, that'd be even fucking better.
That was just a very conservative estimate. That was just like, it's a non-zero number. That was my point.
Yeah, but it could always be better, because unfortunately, there is a lot of abuse in, say, our foster system. Because people see, oh, this child for a paycheck, give them a shitty life and I'm pocket that money.
Yeah, so just because you put a child up for adoption doesn't mean that they're going to get sucked into the adoption and into the foster care system, because there's actually a shortage of adoption for babies, because people want to adopt babies, because some people just can't have children, and there's a demand for that. There's a demand for that. Obviously, yes, there's a problem with them growing up in foster care and getting kind of stuck, because it's not as easy to adopt a teenager, you know?
I use it kind of just to bring those issues up, because a lot of them don't think about, they just do like the general, oh, life is precious. If life is precious, if that person gets stuck in the system, unfortunately, how are you going to make sure their life is good? Their life is taken care of.
Yeah. So it's not, on both sides, we and again, this is due to the media, we pinpoint on one argument, and we're not willing to, like, with our theological viewpoints, we've put them in how they affect our worldview, how they affect our life. I see the transformation you're doing in front of our eyes and living with your theological convictions day by day and changing you're willing to put that forethought into it. You're willing to go, this is true. This is my convictions. I'm going to do the best to live them out to the best of my ability. A lot of people aren't willing to even put the forethought. They just go, oh, my pappy was pro-choice, or my pappy was pro-life. That's how I am. And they don't put any more fucking thought into it.
Right.
There's virtue signalers on every fucking side, and it's sickening. Whereas at least we might disagree, but we're having a discussion and we're willing to take the steps to do something and at least have these discussions start something somewhere.
Yeah. So one thing you brought up was when we visited the Lutheran Church, just kind of seeing the what they do, the organizations they partner with specifically. This may date this episode, but ironically, this last Sunday at my church was the Sanctity of Human Life Sunday. And so they kind of had a pamphlet talking about the pro-life organizations they work with. One of them is the Hope Clinic for Women, which kind of equips families for unplanned pregnancies, access to women's health care, prevention education, pregnancy loss, and postpartum depression. And then there's another one that they work with called the Pregnancy Centers of Middle Tennessee, which do the services such as free pregnancy testing, life-affirming, limited free ultrasounds, accurate and complete information on pregnancy, parenting, adoption, abstinence, and abortion, medical and social service referrals, post-abortion peer consulting, and speakers for churches and civic organizations, material assistance for mother and baby, parenting classes, prenatal and childbirth education for those experiencing unplanned pregnancy, dealing with pregnancy issues in the past, or planning for the future. So there are pro-life organizations out there that are doing a lot of this, and there's literally thousands of them out there that are doing essentially what I would call the few good things that Planned Parenthood puts out there and tries to say, like, this is what we do. We don't like abort kids all that much, but essentially the pro-life organizations are filling that need. And that kind of brings up the scope of what a pro-life individual can do. Some people see it as their vocation to adopt. Some people see it as their vocation to help with, the foster care system or whatever it may be. But there is inherent limitation to the scope of what an organization can do. So that's why pro-life organizations focus on that specific area, and then other organizations can tackle other things just because it's not feasible to manage everything.
Yeah, and that's like in the Christian worldview, you're limited as a church of what you can do.
In theory.
And you're limited. Yeah,
Hopefully.
in theory. But you don't have a billion people to go do fucking everything, essentially what I'm saying.
Right.
But what matters is that you're doing your best and you're trying to make a difference. It doesn't matter.
Pretty
how
much do
big
what
or
you do and
small.
advocate for what you can't.
Yeah. And again, I think too many people, the vocal minority, again, gets screwed because the loudest people are usually the ones doing the least. They're loud for a reason. They're not loud for the right reasons all the time. Like when people get on the pedestal and go, I'm anti-abortion, even though my wife had 3 of them. There's that guilt. Whereas all the people who are actually doing stuff are quiet. They take pride in doing what they do, and they are moved by their convictions, not by their greed or their negative pride. That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go into one last kind of counter argument, which I think is important to address. Abortions should be allowed if they are medically necessary. I guess for starters, I imagine, given your position, you would agree with that statement. Both of you guys.
Yeah, with the legalistic term of abortion. Currently, the legal term of abortion, which I stated earlier. Yes.
Okay. So I would say, because this does get hairy, right? There are obviously medical complications. I'm not, super well versed on female anatomy, but I believe it's the fallopian tube where sometimes
a tubal pregnancy. Yeah, those
Yes.
can kill you easily.
Yeah, right. So, just in general, the goal of a pro-life individual is to preserve life in the case of the mother and the child. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know what's best in every situation, but in principle, what ought to be done ought to have both lives in mind. Abortion per se need not even be legal in these cases because there are medical procedures that can be done that do not intentionally kill the child. Though the child may survive, a medically necessary surgery does not constitute an abortion unless the child is deliberately killed. So I believe what we ought to do is invest more research into these types of procedures instead of just defaulting to abortion.
Well, I could get behind that, but the issue is not all pregnancies are viable. Like a tubal pregnancy, that can happen. It's technically called an ectopic pregnancy.
Yes, that's what it's called. Yeah.
It can happen in the ovaries. It can happen in a lot of different areas, and nine times out of 10 is extremely dangerous.
Yes. Yeah.
Like it needs medical intervention.
Right.
Yeah, that was the word I was looking for. And
I think we should look more into these and try and, again, right now we don't have the technology to have a best case ideal scenario in that case. But I think we should invest more research into that kind of procedure instead of just being like, well, we know how to abort it, so we'll just do that.
I agree. Obviously, I'm always down for more medical research of all types, because it's necessary to understand, and if there's a way to make that viable, there's some women who try for years and end up having a tubal pregnancy that they can't carry because it will fucking straight up just kill them and the baby. If they find a way to be able to circumvent that and make it viable, that would, I think, be a general good, and just even outside of the whole pro-choice or the abortion argument here.
Discussion.
Yeah. It's like with, for example, like looking at children mortality rates, anything we can do to make sure it can happen is a good thing. Like we can find like, this child has a heart issue. Okay, once we get the baby, he has to go to surgery, get these medicines, get this procedure, and he will grow up never knowing that 10 years ago, he should be dead.
Or the fucking babies when we were kids that were born with their heads connected, and they successfully separated them motherfuckers. 20 years before that, they got 6 months.
Or like last year, there was a this year, there was a pregnancy that was super, like the earliest, and that survived. And with medical technology, that baby survived, where a few years ago, they would have just been dead.
Yeah, I think that's also kind of a problem with the viability line, is the viability line is constantly moving backward.
Yeah, which, I mean, that's not a bad thing. If it's...
And we'll talk about that actually probably later when we talk about the current case challenging Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, I think the viability line, there is a stop point where it is viable or isn't, at least right now. But who's to say we couldn't put that baby in a little inoculator and then boom, have a fully grown human in 100 years.
Then getting into that is also ties into economical dispositions, because in America, if you guys don't know, medical care is really fucking expensive.
And pregnancy is expensive.
It costs more to be born than it does to die. You can get thrown in a casket for a couple grand.
That was the More You Know song, by the way, in case people couldn't tell.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, this is why it's a multifaceted issue, especially in America currently, because medical care is really fucking expensive, even with insurance.
Yeah.
Like just getting simple procedures is like $500, and that's after your insurance is paying $4 or $5 grand to the hospital. You still got to come out of pocket for that.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any other kind of arguments you guys have to put forth, or are we ready to go ahead and move on into the procedures part of this?
Let's get into that delicious baby soup.
Oh, I hate it. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the procedures. I think it's important to know how exactly some abortions are done, because some people don't know about this, including the people who support it. There's actually a video series that I've watched that Live Action does, where they go up to kind of people who are center-leaning politically, who say that they're pro-choice. And essentially, they don't really know much about abortion, but like I say, pro-choice sounds more virtuous, so that's just kind of the side they choose to side on. And essentially, they show them a video about the procedure. It's not literally, a video of an abortion being performed, but it's a doctor kind of explaining, a doctor, which I'm going to go into his information, who has performed over 1,200 abortions, and it's kind of an illustrated version of that. If you want to see those videos, they are in the show notes, but obviously viewers' discretion advised, because they're very intense.
Yeah, and I mean, there's also, heck, you can look it up on YouTube now. Because I remember just the YouTube algorithm feeding at one time a bunch of people the same kind of animated, illustrated how it happens. And it's like, oh, okay.
It may have been these videos, because they're actually very, very common.
Yeah, because I swear I remember seeing something like that.
Yeah.
Which, either way, if you support or don't support it,
it's good to be informed at the very least. Yeah. So that's the objective with this section, is I just want to explain to people what happens for people who don't know, because I didn't know for a long time. Okay, so again, viewers' discretion advised. Brace yourselves. If you're squeamish, this is very gruesome. So suction or D&C abortions are performed in the first trimester and are the most frequent type of abortion procedure. This involves inserting a 14-inch catheter inside the womb and turning on a suction with a force that is 10 to 20 times more powerful than a household vacuum cleaner. The force splits the developing fetus into several pieces, which get sucked into the catheter and disposed. That is one type. Chemical abortion pills are also used in the first trimester. The first pill blocks progesterone, which is responsible for stabilizing the lining of the uterus. With the uterus broken down, blood and oxygen are cut off from the baby, and it suffocates. 1 to 2 days later, a second pill is administered, which causes severe cramping and bleeding to force the now dead fetus out of the woman's uterus. The entire process is very physically painful for the mother. She may even see her dead baby within the pregnancy sac after expelling it and likely flushing it down the toilet. Dilation and evacuation abortions are performed in the second trimester. This involves inserting a Sofer clamp, which is like forceps with teeth, inside the womb, clamping down on the fetal appendages, and pulling them apart from the baby piece by piece. The head of the child is usually too large at this point to be pulled out in one piece, so the abortionist presses the clamp on the head of the child, shatters it into pieces, and pulls out the remains. And the last type is injection and stillbirth, which are performed in the third trimester. At this stage, most babies are fully developed and can survive premature birth. This procedure takes 3 to 4 days to complete. On day 1, digoxin is injected into the baby's head, chest, or heart to induce cardiac arrest. Again, because the baby is so developed at this stage, it will feel pain. A type of seaweed is inserted called laminaria to dilate the cervix, and the woman will carry this dead baby for 2 to 3 days. Day 2, the laminaria is replaced and an ultrasound may be performed to ensure the child is dead. If it is not, another lethal dose of digoxin is injected. Between this day of surgery and the next, the woman may go into labor and be forced to push out her dead baby into a toilet at home. If she does not make it to the next day of surgery, if she does make it to the next day of surgery, she will birth her dead child at the hospital. If the child does not come out whole, then a D&E is performed. The surgery in particular has a high risk of hemorrhage, lacerations, and uterine perforation, as well as the usual risk of maternal death. Future pregnancy complications, such as premature delivery, such as loss and premature delivery, are all very common due to abortion-related trauma and injury to the cervix. Now, again, my position here is that killing an innocent unborn child is morally wrong. All of these procedures are evil and callous, and I sincerely believe all Christians ought to fight this. We don't treat anyone else this way. We don't treat anyone else the way we treat the unborn during an abortion. Oftentimes, as a pro-life individual, I feel like the burden of proof is forced upon me to prove why abortion should be illegal. After looking into these procedures, I would ask someone who is pro-choice, why on earth would it ever be justifiable to kill an innocent human being, especially with these inhumane methods? And I will yield my time.
See, the only thing I'm gonna add in here is the only time where I would see these as being necessary is, again, with the issue of what is life in the legal sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because and obviously this is very far in and few in between. The only time where I would say it would be morally right in a worldview is sometimes babies are still legally alive in their mother, but they don't have the organs to live. The same thing with someone being brain dead on a ventilator. They're still technically alive, and if you unplug them, it's still homicide. But those are especially for the last one, that's the only time where it is even, I don't even know the exact word for it. That's the only time where it is proper to do it, especially. And I think most people who are even on the pro-choice side would say, yeah, those should only be done in absolute medical necessity. Like if the baby, if it doesn't have a fucking brain and it's born and it's going to cause issues for the mother, that's when you need to terminate. For lack of better terms.
Right.
But again, those are far and few in between. Even statistically, we see that most are done in the first part, which is the pill-induced, and the first one you said was the catheter.
Yes, I think I said that's the most common one. Yes, it's the most frequent.
Yeah, though I know the pill one is becoming nowadays. The pill one I think is more common.
Yeah, there's lots of problems with that I unfortunately haven't done a ton of research on, but I've heard about. And yeah I'm not going to go into that just because I haven't done enough research on it. But there's a lot of problems
those
with
two are the most used.
Yeah, the third one, even in places where abortion is legal, those are usually saved for, dire means. But it's a very, especially the last ones are very, very seldomly used for obvious reason. And even if pro-choice or pro-life, whatever side you stand on, you should be aware of what actually happens.
Yeah, that's really all I wanted to do with this specific segment is educate people, because that's one of the things we're going to talk about is education. and people on both sides of the issue need to know what the issue is. I think a lot of the time this issue does get smoke screened by fluffy virtue signaling language, and we're not actually talking about the specific issue itself. And that's why, pro-lifers can be accused of being gruesome to prove their point, but the point is the point is that this is gruesome, and people need to know that it is gruesome. And
yeah, I mean, it's a medical procedure.
People need to know how vile the procedure is if they're going to support it.
Yeah, and I'll stand on that too, because even with like the death penalty, if you're going to support it, you should know all the ways it is carried out in your legal area. So whether it's electrocution, hanging, firing squad, lethal injection, gas chamber, you should be aware of those just as much if you want to be
informed on the issue and
if you want to have a properly structured opinion, yes,
right.
And I think the same is here, because that's how it happens. It's a medical procedure. It's documented.
All medical procedures are pretty brutal. Well, at least anything.
I don't know about ripping a human being limb from limb brutal, but that's kind of a different. Yeah, of course. There's medical procedures can be a little gruesome, but
they're not pretty.
When we're talking about human life, ripping children limb from limb, we don't even kill people death penalty that way. That's like medieval, like we're gonna have 4 horses yank you apart.
I don't know, we just paralyze you and then let burning potassium sulfite run through your veins.
Exactly. Much more humane.
I disagree.
I was being sarcastic, but.
Or strap you up to an electric chair and just give you a couple zappy zaps.
Or the gas chamber. That one's
that's the worst, because you suffocate with cyanide gas and
all right. Well, I think we're
temperature.
Hitting a digression. So
be informed, people.
Yes, that's essentially the point of this part. And that is where we are going to end our discussion for today. If you enjoyed this episode, definitely share it around. Obviously, this conversation is not done. We have another part that will be coming out next week, so be sure to stay tuned for that. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can email us at facingthegatespod@gmail.com. If they're related to this episode, you may want to wait until the next one comes out, because they may be answered then. If you want to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, we are at Facing the Gates. And I think that's about it. Michael's not here to help me say it's been real, but I'd imagine if you were here, he would say it's been real, and that it's been fun, and that it's been real fun. So, see you next week.